in my experience, that's a much more successful way of coming across not like a hall monitor, but instead as someone who can be more productive in changing their minds. What is this? Are you going to cover the QT situation because she's getting a lot of hate right now? He already did. No, I didn't. I'm not entirely aware of what has taken place with QTCinderella. I've only seen a couple tweets and shit, but I think as societal conditions worsen, people tend to look at imperfect allies and whatever their take is, no matter how bad it might be, right? People tend to look at imperfect allies as like the main enemy. I'm not one of those people. I never will be one of those people. Maybe because it's my privilege of being a white man, you know, but I'm always going to be broadly understanding of people's background and some of the things that they say that come across as not so great, or especially in a moment of panic, if they feel like the pressure is on and then they end up ballooning into a much larger issue. White man and rich, yeah. I mean, you already know I'm the enemy. Bro, are you blaming society for Cutie's words? Well, one, I don't even know what she said. Well, I know Cutie. I've said this before, but sometimes otherwise good people can come across very poorly. And I think the same level of charity and grace that we would offer people that we know personally, we often don't offer to people behind a camera. And the reality of the matter is the immediate pushback also causes people who are not ready for any sort of pushback whatsoever and treat it as hostile, will cause them to double down and make mistakes or come across really poorly. But ultimately, I usually try to look at everything that a person is doing, you know? It's objectively very difficult for me to look at Twitch streamers, or at least like Twitch streamers like QTCinderella, or even Twitch streamers like the FaZe Clan boys, as major ops or major hurdles against like queer liberation, black liberation, and the overall liberation of all peoples, when there are much more important targets out there that get no scrutiny whatsoever because they're not in the ally adjacent territory. And it's also doubly silly when I consider my own position, which is someone whose ops are in the American government, you know, someone who's trying to do the right thing every day, combating this administration's fascist policies. It comes across as like very narrow in its focus. It's difficult to get people on board with stuff, especially when the easiest type of jokes that you can do is often targeting those who are vulnerable and marginalized. And a lot of people lean into that. So I perhaps give even more grace to those who don't always lean into that when they could easily do that with not only no repercussions whatsoever, but with promotion associated with it. There is a avenue for that sort of behavior. There's quite literally an avenue for that. Like, you can gain more prominence if you become openly reactionary. This isn't even about Cutie, by the way. I don't know. It's just, it's very unproductive to grift to the left, quote unquote, grift to the left. Watch Cutie's VOD if you want an in-depth apology. She apologized for it. Good. Remember, this doesn't mean that QTCinderella nor anyone is actually infallible or above accountability or they're perfect. This is a reflection of the human condition, that we are all imperfect, that we all make mistakes. And sometimes, or all the time, we don't want to acknowledge that we made mistakes. Sometimes we can't see it because we're blinded by our own privilege. And in other instances, even if we kind of see it, it takes a while to get on board, especially if the broader attitude in the space is these wokes. They're unbearable. This is something that I warned about quite a bit. Like, people literally look at us and my community, in spite of my attempts to constantly try to dial back, endlessly going after everyone over perceived slights or major slights that are valid, but making a much larger ordeal out of it. You're missing the point. Them already, if they don't like us, it's not our job to get them to like us. What are you talking about? No, you're wrong. Your take is her take, Lamau. They about to fry your ass. OMG, I hate this drama shit. No, that has always been my job. No, that's you've completely missed the point. As a 19-month subscriber, if you think that that's not my job, I'm just sick of these people and how we have to be nice. How about we say f them? Well, the problem is, I understand that. The problem is, if you say that, then we can't win them over. And if you want to make changes, you got to win them over, especially those in the margins. I would present the impact that even QTCinderella has had in a very positive manner with the likes of Jason the Ween, someone that you guys actually enjoy. Jason the Ween has an incredibly tolerant community, especially in comparison to the vibes and the overall attitudes that many have in that demographic. We were just talking about the alt-right. We were just talking about the far-right manosphere pipeline just a second ago. They'll always win if we keep up this mentality. That's the unfortunate reality. They don't have these sorts of hangups. They don't need to have these sorts of hangups because there is no protection that is required for any of the marginalized people. So it's a much easier ground for them to stand on, to constantly refill their numbers, to constantly bring on more people onto their side. Whereas those of us who are on the left have a much more difficult undertaking. Privilege ass take, I love you, but be for real. It's also entirely dependent on the severity of the gripe. Like, I'm not in here being like, yeah, immediately have someone like hang out with someone who is being a or some shit. Don't be ridiculous. That's not my point at all. But I think a lot of you immediately take it to that level, and it's understandable because that is what you have experienced in your life. I should have established the boundaries. Now, obviously, they can change, but it's kind of like how we do the moderation in this community, right? Where there are certain things that go beyond a minor slight. There are certain things that go beyond minor slights. There are here and straight in them, as opposed to, oh shit, I'm getting clapped. What the hell is going on? God damn it. The internet's getting cooked. Yeah, I'm back now. Okay. Are we good? I didn't speak as soon as it bricked, I stopped speaking. Don't worry, you didn't lose anything. Everyone goes on a different journey. Sometimes you have that kid that we just watched on The Guardian talk about how he went on his own personal journey and was luckily snapped out of the manosphere black pill incel pipeline. Others are not so lucky. So my goal is to try and use the privilege that I have to try and pull people that are in the margins, that are about to make a big leap in the rightward direction, back to our side and develop a better understanding. And I think the only way that I can do that, or the way that I've done so successfully over the last couple of years, by showing people that those who are right-wing, who hyper-focus on marginalized communities, it's the same social pressure dynamic that I was talking about. I think that's a better way to deal with it. It's a better way to deal with it than to immediately clamp on people. Because in many circumstances, due to the same dynamic that I explained, systemic factors at play, and the social conditioning that comes along with it, many people don't even realize that they are engaging in oftentimes dangerous rhetoric or dehumanizing rhetoric. They just think like, oh, this is just a joke. What's the problem? But if we check them and say, hey, man, that's kind of fucked up. Why are you saying this? Especially after developing social capital with those people. In my experience, that's a much more successful way of coming across, not like a hall monitor, but instead as someone who can be more productive in changing their minds. Now, of course, as I always say, this is not something that I expect from people who are directly being marginalized in that moment. And I do understand why people get mad. I understand it. That can be their first step to finding them. Yeah, exactly. I think these broader initiatives of having normal relationships with people who are not like outwardly political content creators, for example, can also help many find communities like this one. It's been very effective. And it's been especially effective. If it wasn't, then the right wing and these like dipshit, incel, racist, transphobic people wouldn't be actively trying to make me into a toxic person that is irredeemable and even go after my friends who have nothing to do with politics at all. They do that so that I am isolated in general, because they realize that if I'm not isolated and I have normal relationships with these other communities, then their fan bases will be much more charitable to my worldview. And God forbid, maybe even change their perspective. But that's it. Cutie's problem is unrelated to you. Yeah, I mean, I'm not very familiar with what happened. I'm just talking about my own principles that I oftentimes repeat to an audience that doesn't want to hear it. That's not true, actually. Many of you do want to hear it. Some of you even recognize that you took advantage of that charitable tone that I took on for whatever perceived bigotry that you exhibited, and therefore became who you are now. But yeah, I'll always point to Speed's growth and why I always present Speed as like a wonderful example of growth in general, even though the odds were absolutely stacked against that. And I'll always present someone like Jason, for example, as a great alternative. People that aren't expressly political at all. The type of content creators that are seen as apolitical. And yet, they're much more tolerant. These guys could just as easily been Aiden Ross adjacent content creators, you know? And it's important for us to recognize that, where a lot of people go, oh, wow, look at that. You're, offering charity to people just because they're not like racist shitheads or whatever. But it's like, yeah, if the entire media environment nowadays, especially after Elon Musk took over Twitter, is rewarding you for being a racist shithead and you're not doing that, then, I'm going to be nicer about that. I'm going to weigh it against environmental circumstances. That's it. You feel me? And I do this to people who have declared me their enemy, people who have declared me to be their ops and shit too. Chat, how is he responsible for explaining somebody else's actions? I don't even know what people are mad about, but I don't really care, to be honest, because nothing I said is different than what I've said a million times over, is what I believe.